All right, let's dive into something really big today. We're going to explore a hypothesis that is honestly massive in its ambition. It's an attempt to draw a straight line connecting the tiniest particles in the universe, the deep mystery of our own consciousness, and, the very planet we're standing on. It's a huge idea.
I mean, think about that for a second. What if a single idea could explain both subatomic particles and human thought? That's a really bold question, right? It's the kind of thing that sits right on that fascinating line between hard science and deep philosophy. And that's exactly the challenge that the source material we're looking at today takes on.
So, just to be super clear from the get-go, we're stepping into a pretty speculative framework here. This isn't mainstream physics. Our goal today is to unpack it, to look at the pieces, and really understand the wild, ambitious story it's trying to tell.
Okay, so if you're going to build a theory of everything, where do you even start? Well, according to this hypothesis, it all begins with what it calls a foundational sequence. Think of it like the most basic recipe imaginable, a recipe for reality itself.
The source itself lays out a very clear step-by-step progression. It all kicks off with the neutrino, that super tiny, almost weightless particle that's zipping through us all the time. The theory says the neutrino gives rise to something called an axion, which is a particle that's still theoretical, by the way. And from there, it moves into the void, which then creates what the author calls 2D matter. So it's a chain reaction. And that sequence you just saw, that's it. That's the bedrock. Neutrino, axion, void, 2D matter. You've got to remember that 4-step chain because in this model, literally everything else is built on top of this one fundamental process. Okay, so we have our foundational sequence. But just having a process isn't enough, right? Something has to, manage it. And to solve that, this hypothesis introduces a couple of brand new, totally theoretical particles to act as the managers of the whole system. First up is something called the Philfo particle. Its job, according to the theory, is to manage the flow of, pretty much everything. We're talking light, sound, vibration, even the density of other particles. The best way to think about it is like a cosmic traffic controller, directing the fundamental forces of reality.
And of course, what good is a traffic controller without stoplights? That's where the second particle comes in, the Janus particle. The theory describes it as existing in 2 layers that literally surround and contain the Philfo particle. So it's like a housing or a gate.
So this really clarifies their relationship, doesn't it? If the Philfo particle is the manager, directing all that traffic, then the Janus particle is the controller. It's the one with the master key. It's what can lock and unlock the very streams of energy and matter that the Philfo particle is trying to manage. One directs, the other controls. All right, so we've got our sequence, and we've got the special particles that are supposed to manage it. But what's the actual force that does the work? What shapes matter into, shapes? This is where the hypothesis brings in a really fascinating and, I should say, kind of controversial idea called cymatics. So you might have heard of cymatics. In the real world, it's the study of making vibrations visible, like when you see sound waves creating these beautiful geometric patterns in a tray of sand or a dish of water. Well, this theory takes that concept and just scales it up, way up. It proposes that cymatics is the key force that takes non-living 2D matter and actually turns it into living biological matter. And this quote from the source really nails down its role. Notice that word yielding. Cymatics isn't just a passive force that maintains stuff, it's actively creating biomatter. It's presented as the literal bridge between something inert, like a rock, and something active, like a cell. Okay, hold on, because this is where the theory takes probably its biggest and most ambitious leap. We're moving away from just physical matter now and into the realm of consciousness itself. So how does it do that? Well, it proposes a new fundamental particle, but this one's for consciousness. It's called the Psychon. The idea here is that the Psychon is the absolute smallest, most basic unit of thought or awareness, a particle of consciousness. Now, the author doesn't just toss this idea out there randomly. The Psychon is actually woven pretty tightly into the whole system we've been building. The theory links it directly back to that axion particle from the very first sequence. It says the Psychon uses the streams coming from neutrinos and that it operates inside all that 2D matter we talked about, cosmic, biological, and geological. Okay, so we've got particles, forces, and even consciousness. How does this hypothesis try to connect all these pretty abstract ideas to the world we actually live in? Well, it tries to build a bridge to everything from our own DNA all the way to the geology of the Earth. So the next layer of complexity here actually comes from something pretty simple: basic chemistry. The theory suggests that if you add solutions that either repel water, that's hydrophobic, or attract water, hydrophilic, you can create an even higher order structure. And it calls this a 5D system. And these 5D systems, this is where things get really wild. They're proposed as the foundation for a so-called 5D DNA. And who's in control? That Janus gatekeeper particle we met earlier. But here's the kicker. The theory claims these systems link our biology directly to the Earth's core, which it describes as being a natural ferrofluid, basically a liquid magnet. It's a huge claim.
You know, a theory this grand and all-encompassing, it should probably have some practical application, shouldn't it? And, well, the source makes a very specific claim on this front. It suggests this whole framework could actually help us deal with one of the most destructive forces on the planet: earthquakes.
So how would that work? The claim is that by using what are called superhydrophobic surfaces, these are materials engineered to be incredibly water repellent, we could somehow significantly reduce the power of seismic waves and even tsunami tides. It's a pretty bold line to draw, right? From this abstract theory of 5D systems all the way to a practical solution for natural disasters.
So let's just step back for a second and look at the whole picture. When you put all the pieces together, you can really see the sheer scale of the ambition here. This is an attempt to create one single, unified story that connects a tiny neutrino to our DNA and our consciousness to the very core of the planet.
And that really leaves us with one last really important question to think about. When an idea tries to explain, well, this much, when it weaves together things we can measure with things we can't, at what point does it cross the line from being a scientific hypothesis and turn into a philosophy of everything? It's something to chew on.